face. And you look really good.
It must be a horrific sight.
Okay.
Kevin, we don't have the newest budget, right?
I attached, no, you do not, but attached that you have that, I think I sent that to you already. Behind that first sheet, you have the summary of the reductions.
Okay.
And so you can see the revised amount and then where the reductions came from. Oh, 17,
Yep.
right?
I know Jen will be here any minute. She said to get started. So you guys get to, okay. Welcome. The February 9th, 2023 Board of Education special meeting is called to order at 7 p.m. Board of Education, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Aye.
All in favor? I want to welcome and thank the Board of Finance for joining us to review and discuss the superintendent's current budget proposal. And Michael, I turn it over to you to open your meeting, and then we'll open the floor for public comment.
Calling the Board of Finance meeting to get to order at 7 p.m. on February 9th, 2023.
Excellent. Thank you. Tonight, the Board of Education is holding a special meeting with the Board of Finance to review and discuss the 23-24 initial budget proposal. Following the budget discussion, the Board of Education will be discussing the Middlebrook schedule. It is the Board of Education's usual practice to not set aside time for public comment at special meetings. Given recent events and interests, the board has set aside 15 minutes at the beginning of this special meeting for members of the public to share their views on the matters related to the 23-24 initial budget proposal. The Board of Education has also set time aside at the end of the special meeting for members of the public to share their views on matters related to the Wilton Public Schools and to help inform board decisions on such matters. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker. For the record, please also give your name and your address. There comments from the public on the budget?
Thank you for my wife. She wants me to go first. Good evening, everyone. My name is Neil Oliva. I'm a resident at 77 Cherry Lane in Wilton. I apologize for my voice. I don't have much of one right now, so I do apologize. First off, as a fellow central administrator in my district, I just want to say thank you for all the work that you do around these tables. Board of Ed, Board of Finance, I know how hard it is. I know how hard you work. Just thank you as a resident. Secondly, I just want to take a small opportunity because Kathy Kuhn is here and just how amazing Kathy Kuhn's leadership at Miller Driscoll, as well as all of her staff there, as her son's been there for 5 awesome years. So thank you, Kathy, and to all the teachers and staff there who are just nothing short of amazing. So thank you. And under the 2 minutes. But also to the public comment session here. I had an opportunity to talk to Dr. Smith a couple of weeks ago at a meeting at Miller Driscoll, and we talked about the budget. I just want to say that it's a great budget, and as a resident, I fully support Dr. Smith's budget and his staff's budget. I'm urging the Board of Finance to adopt Dr. Smith's budget, his staff's budget as it currently stands. And someone much wiser than me said, budget is articulation of your vision. So that's a mix of sound education vision and sound financial policy. So thank you very much for all that you do, and have a great night.
Yay! Hi, everybody. everybody. My name is Elizabeth Oliva, and I live at 77 Sherry Lane. Thank you to both boards for all you do for our community. You know, we moved to Wilton for the schools. We did. And I support the town budget, not just for our son Mason, but for all of the town's children, and for all of the town's children in the future. Because my belief is that our money always should be going to educating our youth, because our youth are the citizens of the future. When asked, is this a reasonable amount of money? Yeah, I do think it's a reasonable amount of money, and I'll tell you why. The Board of Finance was so kind, they crunched the numbers for me, and we're looking at, in the neighborhood, of $55 a month for the average household here in Wilton. When I think of that amount of money, I think that we should be putting that type of money towards our children. In fact, I actually believe we should be putting even more. I like to dream big. I invite all of you to dream big. I think that if you want to be the #1 in the state, the #1 in the country, you have to keep innovating. You have to keep doing more. And more takes a little more money. And with that, I invite you all to start to look at our school facilities. Miller Driscoll is gorgeous, and the people that were on that committee are incredible. We love that he's there. And I invite us to think about next year, have we created a bond to renovate Middlebrook? Have we created a bond to renovate Wilton High School? Our children deserve beautiful spaces to learn and for the teachers to teach in a space that is equal to the education they're getting in Wilton. So if we don't support the youth of our town, what are we doing here, right? They are our best resource. Thank you. I know a lot of you, but I look forward to meeting the rest of you later.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Scopani, and I live at 40 Wilson Hunt Road. Thank you to the members of the Board of Education and the Board of Finance for the meeting tonight and for all of the work that you do. I currently have a first grader at Miller Driscoll and a third grader at Cider Mill. When I think about what I want for their education, a budget that simply maintains the status quo is not good enough. As I'm sure we all know, the Wilton School District recently earned the highest score in the state, ranked by the Connecticut State Department of Education's Next Generation Accountability System. That achievement was surely the result of many factors. Our amazing teachers, administrators, instructional coaches, and mental health support, just to name a few. But I think it's safe to say that it was not due to settling for the status quo. We need a budget that not only continues to support our district's current needs, but that gives us the opportunity to grow and invest, to dream bigger and to do better. Now, I understand the question of affordability when it comes to increasing the mill rate. To that point, I would ask you, please do not assume to know what tax burden the residents of Wilton are willing to shoulder. The demographics of our town are not the same today as they were 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago. The economic climate today is not the same as it was 1 year ago. And so it would be a mistake to assume that our residents' positions, their values, and their priorities are the same. I speak with a lot of residents as my position of co-president of the Miller Driscoll PTA. And what I hear from them is not, how can I afford to support the school budget in its entirety? What I do hear is, how can we afford not to support the budget and fully fund our schools? The stakes are too high, and the education of our children is too important to support anything less. Thank you.
Hi, I didn't come prepared with a speech, but my name is Cynthia Stravio, and I'm at 234 Mountain Road. And I just wanted to make the statement that I am 100% in support of the proposed budget. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is David Tadco, 62 Wolf Pit Road. I also want to support the budget in its entirety. I think the Board of Ed does a fantastic job with the schools. I have 2 kids in the system. The care that they've gotten from teachers, the personalized, listening to their needs, and really, beyond just the academic side of things, I think it's been exemplary. The school system has earned its credibility, and I think we need to trust the educators who put out a thoughtful budget. All aspects of that budget, I trust those educators, and I would hope that those that are not in the educational field will respect that as well. Now is not the time to be penny wise and pound foolish. This is the best education, the best investment we can make in our kids. I also hope that all members of both boards take full account of the feedback that's given from the town. I know there was some discussion about letters that were sent in and that they were repetitive. I hope that those letters, even if they do look the same, are all respected and that that feedback is fully taken advantage of. Thank you.
Any other comments on the budget?
I'm Steve Hudspeth, 6 Glen Hill Road. I rise in support of the budget. I've already expressed my views in the letter. I'm not going to take much of your time. What I do want to say is this. If you add the 4.75% that's proposed for this year to the 1.2% that was granted last year, you come out with a number that, if you round it up slightly, averages out to 3% per year. That is remarkably low. What we need to do is invest in our schools, because our schools are our future. Our children are our future. I'm an older person. My kids graduated in the 1990s. They got a wonderful education. They got the benefit of that. It's my responsibility as a senior citizen to continue to support the schools, because they are the heart and the lifeblood of who we are as a community. We don't support them, we don't get the kinds of wonderful results we've heard about, these #1 ratings. Whatever the rating is, the fact is we know around this school our children get extraordinary education. And we can be deeply appreciative of that, both to you members of the board who volunteer your time, to all the administrators, all the educators across our schools. This is a tremendous gift to give to all of us. We need to support you in what you're doing, to recognize the importance of doing it, and to be tremendously appreciative that it's happening. Thank you.
Anyone else for comments on the budget?
Hi, good evening. My name is Mingish. I live in 181 Old Boston Road. I just want to say that I'm 100% supportive to the budget increase that BOE deems reasonable. We all moved here because of Wilton has a good school district, and we want our kids to have a good education. Without enough budget, that's getting very hard. And I think as the parent, you all would agree with me, many times we think our kids are more important than ourselves. But to our kids, education is the most important thing. So again, I just want to say that I'm supportive of the BOE budget proposal. Thank you.
Any more comments on the budget?
Is there a hand? There's might be somebody.
Oh, there's someone online too. Okay. Well, we have time for 2 more, so if it's on the budget.
My message is mixed, but there is some budget commentary in it. My name is Andrew Nixaji. I teach math to 8th graders at Middlebrook School, and I'm president of the Wilton Education Association. The WEA would like to thank the Board of Education and our parent community for digging in, asking the tough questions, and helping to advocate on our children's behalf. Thankfully, the proposed 87-minute block schedule that was discussed so much last week has been shelved after hearing the many concerns of our teachers, parents, and students. The WEA looks forward to partnering with district administrators to help create a bill schedule that suits the needs of the children of Wilton. As a staff, we were able to explore some of the possibilities yesterday during a staff meeting. While all of these new iterations will require impact bargaining as they currently stand, the WEA will work with administration in the hope of creating a schedule that meets the needs of students, administration, and teachers. With budget season here and plans to eliminate 10 English language arts positions at Middlebrook School, 9 English language arts positions at Middlebrook School, we implore the Board of Finance and the Board of Education to find ways to maintain teaching positions that involve direct interaction with children. We must not forget that our students are our most important stakeholders, and we should not ask them to carry the fiscal woes of the district on their backs by cutting the teachers that educate and care for them daily. Thank you.
We have time for just one more on Zoom, too.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Hi, thank you. Would you like to share your comment, please?
Yeah, okay. You can hear me, right? Okay.
Can hear you just
My name is Jacqueline Wei. We live on 136 Scribner Hill Road. So I'm also speaking here to support Dr. Smith's school budget proposal. You know, I think with the crazy inflation rates in the past couple of years, Dr. Smith's budget proposal is very reasonable. Also, understand as board finance member, you always need to consider all aspects of the financial aspect of our town. But I think education should be always our top priority. You know, education is the most powerful weapon for the children, and cutting school budget can always have negative impact on our children's future. So I really hope you can approve Dr. Smith's budget proposal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello?
Hi, do you want to share your comment?
Yes, my name is Yan. I want to share the comments from my kids. So when my kids heard about the schedule change and the cut of English teacher, one of my kids cried right away. And I think all the kids love our teacher. And especially just passed through the pandemic. And I think our kids really learned what the school teach them. Empathy, be kind, like all these things. So my kids' comments is we really need to think about like our teacher really good and they helped us and we love them and they also have families. This is my kids' comments. I know we are experiencing inflation, all these things, and all the people already mentioned. Education should be the top of priority, so I really hope BOE and BOF can consider about this. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're good? Okay. So thank you. We now move on to reviewing and discussing the superintendent's 23-24 proposed budget. I want to again thank the members of the Board of Finance for joining us tonight. Tonight's discussion and review is a continuation of a process that we began in early winter, and I think the increased communication between our boards is serving us very well this season, especially as we find ourselves in particularly challenging fiscal environment. Kevin has already found ways to reduce the initial proposal from 5.99 to 4.75, and I'm going to turn the discussion over to him to get us started.
Great, thanks. Well, welcome. And we should add a line item to buy a giant round table, because this is such a weird setup.
Can't afford it.
It was cut, Chris. Right.
Maybe
So,
we can.
I think, you know, what's been different about this year, as you well know, is we've had the opportunity over the last 6 months to engage at your meetings. So I appreciate the opportunity to just continue that conversation and just talk through some of the budgets, the drivers, and the pressures that are being placed on the budget. I thought just to frame the conversation a little bit, I'll just give you kind of a high-level overview just to just kind of set it up. You know, first in terms of, you know, just budget goals, what is it we're trying to accomplish? At a high level, our goal is to continue to provide a world-class comprehensive education to all of our students ages pre-K to 22. That includes a solid foundation in core academics, addressing 21st century skills. You've seen and heard some of that probably through the work around our Portrait of a Graduate, and then providing opportunities to excel in the arts, in languages, in athletics. We want to ensure really that our students are able to compete with the very best from wherever, you know, they may come. Beyond that, we remain focused coming through this pandemic to raising overall achievement as well as, particularly achievement in mathematics. And then alongside that, we have corollary goals committed to narrowing the achievement gap between our kind of mainstream students and our most struggling learners. That's been an issue that's plagued us for a very long time. So with those goals in mind, how do we go ahead and accomplish those goals? The first is to ensure that we have a strong curriculum in every single area of our operation. As, again, I'm sure you know, we've been engaged in a multi-year program of systematic curriculum improvement, something, the folks behind me here and across the way have been engaged in on the ground. As part of that, we pay very close attention to our hiring, and we seek to hire the very best teachers that are available. And then once we have them in our system, we provide the very best training for those teachers and support. Yes?
I hate to interrupt, but I'm
Lynn.
being asked by a lot of people to ask you to speak a lot louder and get a microphone. Most people in the back can't hear you.
I will do my best. How's that?
I'm representing the crowd.
Thank you. It's good to see you. Right. This is one of the challenges of having a meeting in public. Is that better, folks? Yeah. Right. All right, good. So you'll just have to nudge me if I go quiet on you again. All right, so as I was saying, part of our responsibility once we hire the best teachers we can find is to provide the best training and support for those teachers that we can manage. We also need to provide wraparound services and programming to support all of our students with specialized needs. And then we need to provide the infrastructure to ensure effective, efficient functioning of our schools and programs. That infrastructure is primarily human, it's also material, it's also capital. I think you know this already, but as we develop and propose budgets, we attempt to manage the inevitable tension between providing adequate funding, sustaining the momentum around continuous improvement, and keeping a bottom line in place that our taxpayers in this town will find acceptable. So if we think really recently, this year, on the one hand, we've seen tremendous growth in student achievement. And I think this whole community needs to celebrate this because, as somebody said, and I'll say it 1,000 times, it's not a small thing that Wilton Public Schools was the top performing district on the state's accountability index. And so not only did we collectively accomplish that this year, we accomplished that coming out of the pandemic. When you look at the national data across the country, districts and public schools are trending in the opposite direction. So I think that's a real celebration for us, for our staff, for our parents, for our community. We've also seen an alarming increase in the number of students in serious psychiatric distress. And so while many of those issues may not have been caused by school or even at school, the students come to school, and so it's our obligation to respond to those students. Thanks. To ensure they have the supports necessary so they can learn and grow. We know this year we needed to freeze our budget at the start of the school year because of the high cost of outplacements direct resulting from a number of students in very acute psychiatric distress. I don't know if that's better or worse, so just tell me.
You got another one?
Thanks.
Better.
All right. Is that better?
Better.
That is better. All right. Yay. Okay. I'm going to break out in song in a second here.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you, right? Chris and I share a birthday for the audience.
A decade.
And it's tomorrow.
And it's tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. Normally, it just, again, we've been at this for a while, so for the, this is where I get into the, my comedic routine, but normally we do this on Valentine's Day.
Right.
So we're a little ahead of the game here. So just kind of on the note of what we're seeing with our students, we also continue to see a pattern of increased numbers of calls to 211 and referrals of students for acute psychiatric care. This is something we have to pay attention to. I know, it's terrible, right? There are too many things going on over here. So that's kind of the student and the kind of school side. From a budget perspective, we're also living in a time of high inflation, and as you know as well as I, everything simply costs more. So the board received an initial proposal from me that reflected a 5.99% year-over-year increase in spending. In recent weeks, and many thanks to the Board of Selectmen, to our town administrator for movements there, we've been able to revise that proposal down to a 4.75%. That was also due to a better forecast for health insurance, and then STA, our transportation provider's ability to add drivers so they could cover the cost of athletic runs at the end of the school day. A couple of other comments. Again, you probably, I'm sure, are aware of this already, but budget development begins with each of the local cost centers. So we ask our principals and other administrators and others who are in charge of a budget line to develop locally and to build it upwards. The budget that came before the board was not the proposal that came to me. We reviewed every cost center and we made changes and reductions to just about every line. So we're going to talk a bit about staffing tonight, but I'll just summarize again, briefly. Most of the reductions that I took before this budget came before the board was around staff, and so here were based on the needs that our folks in the school saw. They were proposing to add another administrator at Wilton High School. They were proposing to add paraprofessionals in kindergarten at Miller Driscoll. There was a proposal that's been deferred for a few years for an additional math instructional coach at Cider Mill. There was also a proposal for an additional special educator at Cider Mill, additional school psychologist, and a board certified behavior analyst. So I'm going to ask and answer Stuart's question. Why would we continue to propose adding staff when enrollment continues to decline? And that's a great question. It's one we confront every year. I provided for you just a summary table. I'm sorry, Stuart, I didn't have the foresight to email this to you when I came downstairs, so I apologize. I'll just highlight what I'm looking at. You have some summary level data going back to the 15-16 school year, casting forward to the projected year 23-24. And what I've laid out for you in that table is just what the total FTE was across the district compared to the total enrollment in the two outer columns. I also wanted to highlight for you the prevalence rate of our special education population and the prevalence rate of students who are on Section 504 plans. I put that information there for you because when we look at enrollment compared to staffing, and we've discussed this before, there are categories of staff, and so the staff that's most sensitive to enrollment fluctuations are classroom staff. And in those places, the elementary schools, here at the high school where we schedule to the section, when you reduce the number of students or you change the section, you can reduce staffing. Middlebrook is a different story because that is a teamed school, and so when students come into that school, if you have kids there, you know this already, they're cohorted by team, and then those cohorts are split up, into groups of 5 because there are 5 teachers concurrently teaching on a 6-teacher team. And so the team structure at the classroom level, makes it much harder to, if we want to preserve that team structure, to adjust staffing there based on enrollment. If you look down the rest of that page, I just added some simple notes so you could see over time where the adds and the reductions are. And it won't mean much to you. What I just wanted to highlight was that the staffing changes are pretty dynamic. And so we reduce in some years, we add in other years, we add across categories, depending on what the needs are in front of us. Again, related to staffing, as we have in the earlier years that I've been here, as we were experiencing enrollment decline, we also looked to shift staffing to invest staff into our priorities. And so some of those areas are certainly special education. That's an area that, again, continues to be very demanding, and we continue to receive requests to add staff. In recent years, we invested in our library learning commons. So in every school, we have at least 2, at the lower schools 3 media specialists, and the library learning commons is an area that we have really serves as the hub of our educational innovation with maker spaces and the work around the portrait of the graduate. And then we've, in more recent years, invested in instructional coaching and in intervention support. So you can see, kind of the change over time, but that's part of the reason why, when we look at staffing, we just don't see a linear decline as well. I think kind of to summarize some of those pieces, we shift in FTE annually, we invest FTE in our priorities, and then that last piece, even though we're in an enrollment decline, if you look at our prevalence rates over that same time range, we are seeing a pretty significant increase in the prevalence rates for students with IEPs, our special ed students, as well as students who require some other modifications, and so they're on Section 504 plans. The needs range from very mild to very severe, and so depending on the child, we staff around that child, okay, and that's governed by those plans. I think just the last note I would offer to you, and then I'll stop talking, is I sent to both boards a while ago a document that looks like this, and so we keep track of our staffing compared to other districts in the DIRG. And so we pull this information from the state database EdSite, and we look at ratios, and we look at ratios by staffing type. And so again, just as kind of summary information, if we look across levels at DIRG, so at the elementary level, and you're talking, student to staff ratio here, we have the highest ratio in the elementary level for administrators. We have the lowest for counselors, social workers, psychologists. We're kind of in the middle of the pack for general education teachers. We have the lowest ratio for library media, so obviously an area where we've invested in. And then we're in the middle of the road for our SPED teachers and SPED paraprofessionals. At the middle school level, we have the highest ratio for administrators there too. Also the highest ratio for counselors, social workers, psychologists. We're kind of in the middle of the pack with general education teachers, and then the lowest ratio for library media, and then with regard to SPED teachers and paras, in the middle of the pack. And then lastly, at the high school, we have the second highest ratio for administrators. We're lowest for counselors, social workers, and psychologists, highest for gen ed teachers, lowest for library media, second lowest for SPED teachers, and then in the middle of the pack for SPED paras. So just broadly on the staffing conversation, we pay very close attention to kind of where we are, relative to our DIRG, and for the most part, I think we're generally in line. The last piece that I had sent to you, and you have it in front of you, is just a summary of the reductions we've taken so far. So in addition to some of the major reductions as a result of a new electricity contract, the Board of Selectmen picking up the security camera installation, and then the major reduction in medical, we've also been able to take a little bit out of the life insurance line, the defined contribution line. We took about 21,000 out of training and conferences, another 10 out of diesel, and then some small amounts out of a salary line for our athletic trainers, small amount out of athletics, and then a small amount out of in-district transportation. And so all of that combined gets us to a current proposal of 4.75%. What else can I tell you? What questions do you have?
Okay. Does anyone on the Board of Finance have questions? Did you want to start, Stuart?
While we wait for Stuart, if I might, Dr. Smith, could you explain why you rejected the requests of your colleagues in that initial budget pass?
So the question was, why did I remove some of the requests that were initially proposed? Personally, philosophically, I'm sensitive to staffing. And so when we get proposals for new staffing, almost as a practice, I push back and ask them to go back and find another way to try to manage the needs that they're seeing. I think, too, I'm also sensitive to putting forward a budget that is manageable, and the initial increase was closer to 10%. And so I just felt like we just couldn't add those staff at this time.
So you were heavily influenced by what you perceived the town of Wilton's taxpayers would support?
Yes.
If you had another $1 million to spend, where would you spend it?
I'd invest in staff. I mean, some of those
You
items
just
on
said
that
you
list.
were
Well,
happy with the reductions in staff.
I said I'm managing a reduction, and I don't have an extra $1 million unless you were planning on writing a check.
Take it under advisement.
Okay, thank you. Seriously.
Seriously, I would?
Well, seriously, I appreciate that. Seriously, for me, in response to your question, we have one of the proposals, and it, wasn't fully formed, and that was part of the reason why I deferred it. But we know as we're watching some of the issues and needs cropping up with some of our younger students, we're seeing a phenomenon now that we haven't seen in a long time, and we have kids at Cider Mill who are just really dysregulated and not able to function well in that environment, and so those kids are now subject to outplacement, and so we'd like to keep all of our kids here. So Andrea and Jen and some others had talked about an opportunity to create a classroom with a board certified behavior analyst and a special educator, and together they might be able to manage some of these students and keep them in our school and then deliver a good education. So that would be one area that I would invest in for sure.
Thank you.
Well, Dr. Smith, I indicated at our last meeting, I thought it would be helpful to everybody, the public, the Board of Finance, if we could just go through some different scenarios just to find out, we talk about numbers like a 4.75% increase, a 5.99% increase, but what would happen if we could only afford like a 3.75% increase? And just stating in simplest terms,
Sure.
I know you don't want to get into real specifics about it, but maybe if you could just indicate generally to us and to the public, if the funding is reduced by 1%, what do we lose?
Yeah, fair. It's a great question. And so we're talking about $907 or so thousand dollars. So at this point, I think philosophically, what we would try to do is, again, continue to, contract services, but not necessarily eliminate services. And so what would that mean for us? We would go back into our staffing pool, and we would look at everything, so we would look at administrators. Is there an opportunity to reduce someplace? We would look at other certified staff across the board, classroom teachers, instructional coaches, other certified folks. We would look at some of those other line items, so stipends, clubs, activities, things like that, and rather than maybe wholesale eliminate them, try to reduce a little bit. The cost to all of those things, even with slight reductions or modest reductions, is reduction in service. I think trying to set up a priority, I would really try to keep class sizes where they are, or at least consistent with each other across the board. We had made a move during the height of the pandemic to reduce class sizes a little bit. They have come up a little bit in the last year, but we're sitting somewhere between 1920 at the lower schools to 2021 at the upper schools, and I think that's a good place for us to be. So I would work hard to prioritize that. I think beyond that, we just have to go back into every other budget category, and I feel like we've already squeezed our supplies pretty tightly, but we'd have to go back and again, I would ask the administrators, are there things here that you can live without for yet another year? That would generally be the approach.
So when you talk about instructional leaders or instructional coaches, for example, since there does seem to be a lot of people watching this tonight, can you explain to everybody what these instructional coaches are and what we're getting?
We're getting tremendous. So these are certified teachers who work with our classroom staff, primarily in the area of humanities and STEM. So we've focused in the last few years really on early literacy and literacy at the high school, at the middle school, and then mathematics through right up through the high school. So these folks are charged with working on supporting curriculum. They are charged with working with teachers on developing and implementing instructional frameworks, providing support and feedback to teachers as teachers try new strategies. They work hand in glove with Chuck Smith behind me and our curriculum coordinators. Through the pandemic, when we implemented the accelerated learning framework, they were instrumental in doing that work. So we've been focusing pretty seriously on looking at student growth in achievement, and they've been supporting teachers in using that data and then trying to plan instruction to help grow students. I think, when I look at all of our staff, I think we have a human infrastructure. I kind of look at the entire system and look at the way that the system supports students in the classroom. So, in other conversations we've talked about, I don't know, somebody used the expression, student-facing or non-student-facing staff, and to me that's a kind of a weird dichotomy, because in my opinion, it's the entire system that's organized around kids and learning, and it's the entire system that supports those kids and supports the teachers in the classroom. And so, is there anything else, Chuck, that I would add? You want to add about instructional coaches?
Well, the only thing I would point to is that we're at the top of the state in academic growth, primarily due to the work of our teachers, but also due to the support that they get from their instructional coaches.
How many of them do you have now?
10.5.
How does that break down by school?
So you have 4 at Miller Driscoll, so 3 are literacy coaches, one's a math coach. Do I want to get weird about the way we've set up a lab class? We've split a couple of those positions, so that's the total FTE, but we've split them so we can add more coaching to math. So we have 2 half-time coaches sharing a classroom, and as part of that, they've made their classroom a laboratory class. They invite teachers in to watch them instruct, but it's a total FTE of 4. We have 3 at Cider Mill, so 2 literacy coaches and a math coach. We have 2 at Middlebrook, 1 of each, and then we have 1.5 here at the high school. So 1 is math, she also supports science, and then 0.5 humanities coach.
And is that the same as we had last year as well?
It is.
Does the teaching staff agree that that is the best use of staffing FTEs? In other words, do the teachers think that they should have instructional coaches versus more student-facing teachers?
Yeah, not universally. We just surveyed all of the staff again at the behest of the board, and so what you find is I think almost overwhelming support at the lower schools. I would say the same almost at the high school, and then there's a real divide at the middle school.
And it seems like we succeed test score-wise in the liberal arts or the humanities, but in math we still are struggling. Is there a reason we have almost double the number of humanities coaches than we do math?
Yeah, we really prioritized as we were implementing new curriculum in the last several years, particularly in the area of early literacy. I mean, that's what we privilege. There's been pretty substantial changes in reading curriculum, in our instructional approach to reading, and so we felt pretty strongly that we wanted to support those teachers in that work. And just for the record, we saw our math scores across the board rebound pretty well this year.
Do you have a guess as to what the impact would be on student outcomes if you doubled the instructional leaders from 10 to 20? If you think they've been quite important in recent success.
Yeah, I would say that's a great question. You want to take that? Sure, go ahead.
Any Dr. Smith will do.
Any Dr. Smith.
At the elementary level, we have to be careful about the capacity of our classroom teachers to participate in coaching. Remember, they teach all subject areas. I do think at the elementary level, more math coaches would accelerate math achievement pretty significantly. I think at this point, the number of coaches we have at the secondary level is fine, although I'd like another 0.5 at the high school.
So what's the all-in cost per instructor? instructional coach then, with the benefits and the salary and everything?
Yeah, so it's figure, we'd have to do a rough estimate, master's 14 or so plus benefits, so 120, 130.
Per coach, 10 times
Fully loaded
10.5
cost.
coaches.
Yeah.
So 130 plus or minus times 10.
Yeah.
So 1.3 million.
About rough, you can probably find that number pretty close in the
Yeah,
budget.
we have it.
Mhm.
So as a town, so the town is investing, call it 1.3 million in these coaches, and it's a good investment. How do we think about the return on investment? So now relative to 10 years ago when we didn't have these teachers, coaches, how do we think about how well we've done?
Yeah, again, I think, we have been building capacity for some time, and, I think what is not always, apparent and even evident in the outcomes is the work we've done around instructional shifts. And, again, I just go back to, some of the really complex work around developing early literacy. If you've been tracking the reading and the debate about science of reading, particularly at the K-3 level. So, we've had quite a bit of work to do in supporting our staff to build their skills. But if you look at our recent data, we're really gaining traction. You just have to keep poking me. Yeah. So I think if you look at it, just general achievement measures, I think we really over the last year really hit on a model that I think makes a lot of sense. So if we are, just talking again about, achievement on the smarter balance to achievement on our MAP scores, I think the investment is well worth it because we're performing, at the top of our dirt in general.
So am I hearing that if Chris decides to write $1 million check, you would propose to put it toward more coaches and not teachers to reduce class sizes?
No, if he was going to write $1 million check, I would put it towards teachers at Cider Mill to create this classroom model, so we can support some of our most struggling learners in this building.
Minus the cost of the table.
Correct. So what is this classroom model that you're referring to?
Well, so we talked, just again, general, it's really specialized support for kids who have really specialized needs in that school. So a certified behavior analyst and another special educator. And so the model, it needs to be, fleshed out in a lot more detail, but, again, just speaking in general terms, we have some youngsters in that building who get very dysregulated and so have a hard time functioning in the mainstream classroom. So they need behavioral support. And so providing the behavioral support in school would allow them to develop some skills that would, hopefully keep them in the mainstream classroom.
So is that classified as special ed funding, budgeting?
It would be.
So by our quick numbers, we spend on average $33,000 per special education student in the district. We spend $13,000 per non-special education student in the district. You would propose to take additional money and increase the special ed budget from $33,000 per student to some higher number?
I would propose, just as I described, yeah, if that's how the average works out, that's how it works out, but this is one of our significant needs for sure.
Is that part of an IEP, or is this over and above what the IEP says?
It would probably be written into the IEP, but I would defer to Andrea about how that would all be formulated.
I won't put you on the spot because I'll write the questions, but I did have some questions about where the students that we're losing go. Do they go to private schools or are they transferring to special ed programs? And just how that pans out with, I won't ask you to answer it now unless you're prepared to.
Yeah, there's a range of schools. It really depends on what their learning profile and what their need is.
Well, I don't mean special ed necessarily. Are non-special ed students leaving the district because the funding is so low and we're getting more special education students into the district because the funding is so rich?
I don't think that's why people make choices to come here or leave here now.
Why do they leave it?
People move, people choose private school. I haven't seen, this was a question that came up some years ago. There was, a bubble, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, where we had a group of kids as they were exiting 8th grade. I think a bunch went to Fairfield Prep. When we looked into it, what we found is, there's a small group of kids, a small group of families who choose private school because that's their choice. They're a smaller group who, may grow disaffected with the education in our school, and so they feel like, they have to go someplace else, but that's a very small number.
Do we know how many students have outplaced to a private school, non-special ed, or, live in the district, but choose to pay to go to a private school versus the public school?
We've only looked at those that leave us, and I don't have those numbers in front of me.
I'll follow up.
Sure.
We talked about instructional coaches a second ago. On the climate coordinators, can you discuss how many of those we have in the district, what their role is, and what the approximate all-in cost is?
Sure. So we have one Safe School Climate Coordinator. Her name is Kim Ziamo. She is a certified school social worker by background. So her job in general is to support all of the mental health teams, to support all of the safe school climate plans in school. So she provides support to administrators, to teachers, to mental health staff. She liaises with families. She liaises with the state. Oftentimes, if there is a crisis, she'll be a support person interacting with 211 or supporting our mental health staff who is interacting with 211. She does some direct contact with kids as well. She also oversees the work around SEL, and so we have some folks who are school counselors primarily who work in our buildings, who are leading some of those efforts with staff. So she helps, kind of coordinate that across the buildings. She is a kind of veteran certified teacher. She's at the top of the scale. So probably we'd have to look at her salary specifically and get you that exact number, but with benefits, maybe 130.
And that's the only dedicated or even partially dedicated full-time employee?
Correct.
She also has an admin full-time, I believe, in the budget.
She does not have a full-time admin. She gets a little bit of support from Helene Walker in my office.
Were we hiring somebody for a similar position last year? I recall seeing a discussion last year.
For a Safe School Climate Coordinator, now there's only one.
So what are we doing to address the psychological needs of the students post-COVID? What services do we provide, and how is it provided? Because I know, like, just for the regular health service, you have a contract with the visiting nurse service.
Mm-hmm.
So they're outside service providers. And, I know we have various counselors in the school, but I don't know how many of those are really psychological counselors. So,
Right.
I mean,
So
you tell me.
I'm
I'll
going to have Andrea weigh in here, but just categorically, right, we have school counselors, and so we have 7 of them here at the high school, and they spend most of their time doing college counseling. They do some kind of social, emotional, or academic support with students. They've spent more of their time in the last couple of years supporting students in crisis, but their primary purpose is to help kids function academically. So that's one category. We have a counselor, 3 counselors, so 1 per grade level at the middle school. We have a counselor at Cider Mill, and we have a counselor at Miller Driscoll. We have social workers, and so social workers will provide family support. They'll try to set up resources in the community for staff. They'll provide direct support to students. And then probably the last category of mental health support staff would be our school psychologists. And so the school psychologists, in addition to providing direct support to students, do all kinds of testing in service to developing IEPs or when students are referred to special education. You want to add to that?
The visual I would set up for you about those 3 categories would be a Venn diagram. Their scope of practice of school counselors, school social workers, and school psychologists, there is some overlap in terms of direct service to students in teaching skill sets to manage emotions, to manage emotional content, to be able to address and maintain a level of stability socially and emotionally in service to learning. Each one also has a secondary scope of practice. So as Kevin said, school psychologists, their function is one of assessment and consultation, where they do deep dive evaluations of students to understand how their brains function best, where their strengths neurological strengths are in learning, where there might be some weaknesses, and how to utilize the strengths to drive weakness, to overcome or mitigate those weaknesses. And so they work primarily with the special education teams and the teachers, general ed teachers, to help understand how students best learn. School social workers, their scope of practice that's unique is family systems work. So our school social workers work not only with the student directly in school, but with that student's family system to help support them, to help engage them in developing independent skills to manage themselves in service to learning. And then, as Kevin said, our school counselors do a lot of work around what we call tier 1 support for social and emotional learning, what all kids need to know and be able to do in that social and emotional realm. And then they also provide direct service and teaching to classrooms of kids around those skill sets related to how do I manage myself, how can I self-regulate, how can I address my levels of anxiety so that I can function well in school. So I would look at it as kind of a 3-part Venn diagram to support the mental health needs of our kids.
So post-COVID, is there in fact a greater need for those services?
I would say yes, but I would also say that this is not what we're seeing now in terms of the mental health crisis that we're facing, not only as a community here in Wilton, but as a nation. That train was on the tracks before COVID. We were seeing the beginning of that long before COVID. COVID escalated the train. So we were seeing higher levels of anxiety and depression. We were seeing higher levels of suicidal ideation, self-harm, non-suicidal self-harm, substance use. Those things were all on the increase prior to COVID. COVID escalated the rise.
So do we need to allocate more resources to this so that the students can learn?
So it's a great question, and it's one that we've been wrestling with. And so it's among the kind of leadership team here, we talk all the time about, are we adequately staffed? And so one of the challenges that our staff faces is the lack of community resources in the region. And so we've seen, for example, we may encounter a kid here in our schools, here at the high school, who has a breakdown, has a real serious episode. We'll call 211, we'll contact the family. The student will be referred to the emergency room. The emergency room isn't equipped with an appropriate, psychiatrically trained doctor. The student get released to his or her parents and then winds up back in school the next day. And there's still, no additional support services. And then our staff are there to, again, try to support the individual and, try to find, care here in the community. So that's a, problem for us in this town, but it's a problem, statewide, probably countrywide. And I think, in the short term, to relieve some pressure, we could. Our staff are managing it, but they're dealing with more emergency response than they have in the past.
And then the other thing, post-COVID, and then I'll let other people ask questions, but it's also my understanding that post-COVID, the students have a lot of catching up to do. There's lost learning time that it's just unavoidable. Do we have any resources dedicated right now to addressing that issue?
Yeah, we do, and we have, and I think this is where, I'd say a couple of things on that. One, when we were planning to bring kids back to school a couple of years ago, working with the coordinators, working with the coaches and the teachers, we really prioritized curriculum because we knew we had to, really get to what was most important. We also got some support from the Connecticut Center for School Change to implement this model that's referred to as accelerated learning. And there's, kind of 5 components in the model. And, I think what we'd say is it's really good practice. And so part of that was just working with staff to really take good data around standards for kids, understand where the gaps were, and then support teachers to teach into those standards to close the gaps. For kids whose gaps were wider, we also had intervention support. So we had funded through a grant some additional interventionists on staff last year that we don't have this year. But we retained some interventionists to do that work. And then if the gaps still aren't closing for kids, we can work them through the, Andrea mentioned the tiered process, so we can work them up to tier 3 and perhaps to a referral to special education. So we do have, I think, very good supports in place, and we pay very close attention to our learning data. We use a tool, it's called the Measures of Academic Progress, so we administer it to students grades 1 through 8 3 times a year. We do administer it to kindergarten twice a year. And we're able to home in pretty narrowly on the skill areas that kids need to have addressed. And I think we've seen, particularly in this last year, a lot of success in that model, and we're continuing it this year, and we'll continue it going forward. On a number of grade levels and a number of standards, we've really narrowed the gap. In fact, we have data this year. Some of our winter map data for our younger kids were exceeding where we were pre-pandemic in some standards.
So would you need to do more, or would you like to do more, and what would it cost? What would you do?
Well, it's people, right? And so when you say more, we're talking about more people. And again, just rough numbers, $130,000 per, if you like. Yeah, I think I would like to do more, and I think if we had more resources, we could do more. And I go back to the other side of the equation is trying to make this affordable. And I think if you follow that train, the next question you should ask me is, well, where would you cut in order to get more? And if there were places I thought we should be cutting in order to do that, I would have already done that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why I didn't ask you.
Hello, Stuart.
Yeah.
Is there any thought leadership around what the time frame might look like in terms of this trend improving or going back to where it was pre-pandemic? You mentioned that in some circumstances there are, but this is, obviously for all of us, very troubling, and the pandemic was particularly troubling for children who were isolated in terms of social activities. And look, I think healthy children probably bounce back more quickly, but what is the outlook from here, and how long does this last? Because one of the things that we're grappling with, obviously, is within the budget, there were grants that were made to the town, to our Board of Education, that funded certain positions, and now those grants are being taken away by the government entities, and now we're left with the decision, do we keep them? And if we keep them, it's brand new funding, because these positions did not exist before the pandemic. So any sense or any thought leadership that you've acquired about what the time frame might look like?
Yeah, so on that, I think it's a great question, and I'd say a couple of things on the grant funding with specific regard to the interventionists and mental health staff. So in one of the grants, there was it was the equivalent of a 1.0 social worker and then a 1.45 interventionist. We did in this budget proposal, we did fold the cost of those personnel into this budget because we really think we need them. I don't see a clear answer to your question. I think one of the next steps we need to take as a school system and as a community is to try to do some root cause analysis and to really engage more deeply with some of the families and some of the kids that are experiencing some of these most acute mental health crises, and just try to look for patterns. Because I don't know, as Andrea was saying, I don't know that all of that was caused by COVID. I think we were seeing a number of signs before the pandemic. The second part of that answer, a couple of years ago, as we were having a similar conversation and experiencing similar just tensions around the budget and trying to make it all work, we made the decision to fold 2 of the classroom staff at Miller Driscoll into the grant. And so that the grant, the ESSER 3 grant, funded those 2 positions for 2 years. We still need them. And so, we have to have those positions have to be in the budget.
One of the things that I always found challenging is differentiating between medical health, psychiatric health, and what's done at the school systems. A broad presumption of mine is that they're incorrect, perhaps, is that there are medical and psychiatric help that exists outside the schools that should be enlisted. How is that managed and how is that differentiated from what you're talking about in terms of needing, potentially having more resources available or having the need for more resources? How do you manage that fine line? And is there a mechanism under which more can be referred out or more external psychiatric resources can be brought to bear?
So there's a major gap in services in the region and across the state. There's just not enough certified mental health professionals to address the need that exists right now. And to be clear, it is not our job, nor is it our purpose, to provide long-term, ongoing therapy, mental health therapy to students. Our job is to help kids develop the skills so they can function and be successful here as students in the school environment. And so, as I was describing before, in the absence of just enough services here in the region, kids are coming back to school and our staff is having to try to support them through the day, and then reach out and on their behalf try to find resources such that they may exist. But it is a major challenge. Part of that challenge, beyond just the fact that there's not enough, some providers don't take health insurance, and so for some families it's really cost prohibitive to provide good, high quality, long-term therapy for kids.
I would also say, Kevin, that out in the public forum, psychiatrists primarily do medication management. That's primarily the function of the relationship between a child, their family, and the psychiatrist is medication management. The therapeutic support that students need is often done in the land of social workers, licensed marriage and family therapists, child and adolescent social workers. Unfortunately, the system, and this is not just Wilton, this is across, you can read this across the nation, the system was built around adult mental health support. It's like a once a week model. Children need more. They need more intensive work to overcome some of the levels of mental health struggle they're having right now with anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, etc. So that it's just not enough. The system isn't robust enough for families to get the support they need for their kids. And often when you're talking about our youngest students who are struggling in that way, there is a whole component to parenting. The parenting of a child struggling with a mental health crisis is an extraordinarily heavy lift. And those parents need a tremendous amount of support in order to stay the course so the child can grow and develop in a healthy way. And that's not as available. When those issues come to school, remember school is mandatory. You can't not go. When those issues come to school and learning is impacted, those two issues become, the term of art in my field is inextricably linked. And when the mental health of a child has a negative impact on their ability to learn, that's the inextricably linked that drives disability identification, that drives special education, and that's when the responsibility turns into the schools. That's where we take over, and we have to work with the child and the family to develop the skills necessary to allow that child access to learning. It's the equivalent of building the ramp. right? That is the ramp for that child to be able to access learning. And that's when it becomes our job. Now, we work extensively with community-based resources such as the OC. Our social workers spend untold hours, both during their contracted hours and after their contracted hours, communicating with psychiatrists, communicating with local therapists to try to wrap around the child and their family. But it is an extensive, when you're dealing with a child at that level of need, it is hours and hours to make a difference over a long period of time.
Is there any hope that any of the funding that we had seen in the past came from the state level would be potentially continued? One of the things that I was surprised by was Governor Vermont announced his budget and tax cuts, and what we're seeing is cuts in funding from the state, I believe, potentially federal grants as well. And I'm wondering if any of that will be extended, given they've been parading the premise that they have an excess and therefore they have abilities to cut taxes at a not just not increase, but actually cut taxes at the state level. So is there anything that we have in terms of a glimmer of hope or any indication that we'll continue to receive some more funding?
A glimmer. So just before I came down, I got a notice that legislature was in session today and passed an emergency bill that it was chock full of all kinds of things. Part of that bill was a correction to the excess cost reimbursement formula. I don't have the specifics, but I think that will mean some additional funds back to us. So that's, there's a glimmer there. The state separately had also announced some time ago a grant to support mental health workers in schools. That we immediately submitted a grant, and we just learned in the last week that we did not receive that grant. While there was no criteria around community wealth, when you looked at the grant recipients, all of the grants went to communities that were much less wealthier than we are. There was a note attached to the declination that said they're going to send another grant application. So we thought we'd make a call and see if we had any shot at the next one. But even I think my editorial on that one is, there were 92 communities that applied for that funding, and 20 of the 92 received funds. And so the state didn't go nearly far enough in addressing the need that communities have described.
Tacking on to Stuart's question, I think it was a year ago in HB 5506, the state reallocated funds away from towns like Wilton for things like special needs to other towns.
Right.
Do you have a sense for what the impact of that decision at the state level, at the House level, to this budget?
Yeah, not yet. So that was I think part of the correction that was made today was in response to that change. I think they they didn't realize what the magnitude of the reduction was going to be. But give me a day to sift through it all and I can probably have a better answer for you.
Got it. So the budget, the new budget, does not reflect the impact of that change. The new Wilton budget.
Your school budget.
School budget.
No, it does not.
Meaning it doesn't reflect the cuts from the state, or it doesn't reflect any adds if the state were to decide?
No, if you look at what we're projecting for excess cost is less, so that's where that would show up. Yeah, and so then that, if the piece of legislation that was passed today is favorable, that's where, that's the line we'd make the adjustment
I
on.
think we can assume it probably isn't, right?
I had a question, unless Stuart has others, on per pupil expenditure, but Stuart, did you have any others?
No, why don't you go ahead, I'll wait.
All right, so on per pupil expenditures, I took the budget that you had prepared, the thoughtful budget, and compared that to some of the other towns. On an absolute budget growth basis of 4.75, we are in the upper half of towns in our DERG. But on a per pupil expenditure basis, so 4.75% budget increase, it's about a 6% increase on a per pupil basis, and that's because of the decline in enrollment. How should we and the residents of this town think about that our cost per student is going up at a significant rate?
Yeah, it is. I think, the per pupil expenditure is a funny one, and I think that's why you can't look at that in isolation. I would also look at, total growth. If you want just some other comparisons across towns, look at, total budget growth across the DERG and look at that over time. And I tried to do some, kind of simple analyses earlier this year, and in terms of total growth, ours is much smaller. I think some place like Darien is like 13% compared to our 3 over 6 years or something. But I also think you have to understand, that distribution. So we're also, as I put in front of you earlier today, we're confronted with a higher prevalence rate in terms of special education. So the only other place that has a higher prevalence rate in the DERG right now is Darien also. And they, that's a vestige from some issues they had some years ago. So I guess my advice to you is to interpret that number cautiously.
Yeah, I'd throw out, Kevin, it's, we have attempted to look at it in a number of ways, and at least you and I have been at this for a few years. Lynn put out a rather good series of analyses in her January 2023, her letter that she sends out monthly, and just data, and I think there's been some information that's been incorrect thrown around or some disinformation. So I think you all done a great job in trying to set the facts straight. I appreciate everything, Kevin, that you, Dawn, and all the members of your staff do to work on providing us with 350 pages of data, and we continue to have more requests. I should probably I thank everyone in the town and act with civility and genuinely care about the school budget even when they don't have children in the schools. I point out I'm always impressed with Mr. Hudspeth, even if we might disagree on complete picture of facts. But I think Lynn's analysis is pretty good, and it does. The one thing we don't have up-to-date information other than we do see what other towns are proposing, and they're pretty much in line with the starting point of where you are. I guess I looked up Darien's proposal for how much they're looking to increase this year. It's 4.9, and New Canaan at 4.8, and your budget right now at 4.75, and Westport north of 5, and Weston, interestingly, is 2.9. But I'm told I shouldn't even look at those because they have different data, of course, in terms of their. And one thing I like to remind people is the dynamics. And as you mentioned, particularly in places like Darien, I think Darien's student population has only moved down by about 1% in the past 10 years, where ours has come down by 14%. So we are one of the leaders, not by a lot, compared to surrounding towns in terms of the shrinking of the student population over 10 years. And I know that's why when people talk about, there have been fairly small increases over the past few years, that has been driven, at least in part, by the view that if student population drops by 2% and you have a 3% increase in compensation and other costs, then you have a net 1% increase. And I think a lot of people don't understand that perspective. And I understand the challenge of working within that framework, because you generally do have an element of fixed costs. And as you pointed out, we do have a rather significant post-COVID series of costs, and we do have special ed costs, which exceed many surrounding towns as well. except to your point, Darien. But even in the last set of data that came out of the Connecticut Department of Education for 21-22, which is the most recent data, we are neck and neck with Darien. We are higher than New Canaan. We're higher than Richfield. We're higher than some of the other towns which we don't like to compare ourselves from an educational standards perspective: Easton, Fairfield, Norwalk, Stanford. So on a per student basis, and again, I understand the government budget, we're spending as much, if not more, than most of those towns. Weston, of course, is a little bit higher than us, and that is because they have about 2,000 students, and we've got 3,700. And Westport does stand out because they're spent, at least that data, they were spending around 5% more than us. And then people will argue that Westport, the data that Lynn's got in her analysis shows that Westport residents, on average, earn 2/3 more. Their adjusted gross income is 2/3 higher on average than Wilton. So it comes down to affordability. We've talked about the surveys, and I hope that everyone on this call, the 90 some odd people who were in attendance online, and those present, and everyone else, responds to the survey when it comes out. But the past surveys that we've had significant responses in 2018. We had 1,411 respondents who only 47% of whom approved of less than a 2% increase. And I realize it should be higher now because of inflation, but I think all of us want to do our part in terms of contributing to the success of the schools, but there's some disconnect between those desires and how much people are willing to spend. We have that 2022 survey with 454 residents, and I think we had a minority that wanted to spend more than we proved. So I think we do have those headwinds in terms of what the population of taxpayers would like to spend, as opposed to what the views on needs and desired outcomes, educational outcomes. So we do have those challenges, and I do think if you get a chance, take a look at Lynn's analysis from January of this year. I think that's beneficial as background information, and but I hope we have other opportunities to continue to maximize those outcomes.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and we're certainly, internally continuing to work on it. And I thought what Lynn put together, I did read it when she published it, and I thought it was, some of the data I'd seen before, but it's helpful to understand, these kinds of comparisons. I think from my role, I put together a budget with my team that I think, describes our needs as you've heard described tonight. We make a lot of choices. I make a lot of choices, always with that, question of affordability in mind, but it doesn't alleviate the challenges that are in front of us, particularly this year.
All right, well, I think I'm going to wrap it up there because the Board of Education will never get home tonight if we don't conclude at least the first half of the meeting. But we have one item of business before we conclude the Board of Finance portion of the meeting. We have to set dates for the public hearing on the Board of Education budget as well as the Board of Selectmen budget. And so to do that, I'll make a motion to the Board of Finance only that we set the date for the public hearing on the Board of Selectmen budget for March 21st, 2023, and the date for the public hearing on the Board of Education budget for March 27, 2023.
27? I'm 27?
27.
Monday.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there a second?
Second.
What was the first one? Did you say, yes?
The 21st. It's a Monday for the Board of Selectmen.
The 21st is a Tuesday, March 21st.
Sorry, but it is the 21st.
So it's Tuesday, March 21st?
Yep. Monday, March 27th.
And then March the 27th?
Yep.
A motion to approve, or second.
Second.
Would anyone like to discuss it? Hearing no discussion, all
Just
those in
point of-
favor on the Board of Finance, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay. On that note, I just wanted to make some comments about public input. I'm seeing that, we have a large audience tonight, which I think is terrific. And my guess is a lot of people have seen the letter that I wrote to Good Morning Wilton, and I just want everybody to understand I really was trying to be helpful in writing that letter, because you have to put yourself in our shoes on the Board of Finance. The toughest question we have to answer is how much can the taxpayers in this town afford to pay, and what are they willing to pay? As you've probably seen through the discussion tonight, there is no question whatsoever on the Board of Finance as to how well these schools are managed and how great of people you have on the Board of Education and in the administration in the schools. We would love to give them everything, but it's not going to surprise you that we're constantly getting communications from people that say they can't afford anymore. And what you should be aware of is that this year is an extraordinary circumstance. I've been on the Board of Finance 4 years. This is my 4th year. We've never been presented with voting for a 4% tax increase. But if the budgets are presented and passed as they've been presented to us, that's what we're looking at. And so when we sit around the Board of Finance table, we're asking each other, how do we figure out, how do we know how much people are willing to pay? And the only way we're going to get any idea of how much people are willing to pay is if you communicate that to us. And we're not professional pollsters. And this is not a science, it's an art. The impact that your comments have to us are going to depend on the quantity, the quality, and the circumstances. And, just because a survey didn't have a big impact on one member of the Board of Finance last year doesn't mean it won't this year. The only thing I can guarantee everyone is if you do not communicate with us, then we cannot take into consideration what your views on things are. So I urge everyone, don't stop tonight. Keep it up, and keep it up the whole time. That's why I laid out all the dates on this, because if you want to have the greatest impact, come to that public hearing on March 27th on the Board of Education budget and express your views then. We do listen to you. We're elected to represent you. We want to hear from you, but it just can't be one-off, one time. We need information, and we need a lot of it, and whatever way you want to communicate with us, please do. So with that, I'll move to adjourn the Board of Finance meeting.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
If you
Stuart,
have any
thanks.
other questions over the next couple of weeks, please.
Everybody's sitting around me, was saying the same thing I was saying, is that we couldn't hear questions and we couldn't hear the answers clearly. And we're here to learn. And so as a result, I would ask, I don't know what the problem is, there were certainly enough things in front of us, but it was very difficult to understand what was going on. And 2 people left that were sitting around me who said they were going home to listen to it on Zoom.
Thank you. We'll look into it.
For being here and for allowing us to do
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Should we spread out?
Yeah, do you want to come around?
Yeah.
So, that's a good idea. So we're not running down the aisle.
Yeah. We can split up so we can see each other better. Possibly, right? What are we doing? Just reorganizing ourselves so we're not in a row. Do you want me to go over there? Sure. Yeah. I'll go over there.
Mandy's gonna go.
Yeah, or if you, somebody else, whatever is easier for everybody to be able to see and spread out.
You ready to roll?
I am ready to roll. Let's let Laura find her seat.
Okay. So
We can take.
we're going to just provide an update to where we are with the Middlebrook schedule, but I wanted to just offer some preliminary comments about that. I think it's fair to remind folks and just ask the question again, since we've received so much feedback in the last several weeks, why are we even talking about a new schedule? And this is, I think just...
You want to use the mic? Well, nothing's changed.
Is that better?
That is better.
Thank
Keep
you.
it in front of your mouth.
Do you see what I got going on over here?
I need to stand.
So the timing of the conversation about a schedule change is interesting because it coincides with the visit from the Tri-State Consortium. They're here today, they were here yesterday, they're here through tomorrow. The team from Tri-State is here this week and they're helping us assess where we are with the implementation of the Portrait of the Graduate. And we know it's early on, but we also know we have blind spots. And so we felt like let's get them in early and have them give us some feedback as we continue to plan. The attributes in that Portrait of the Graduate are, as you know, a balanced, healthy human being, a contemporary multiliterate scholar, a self-navigating expert learner, an active, socially sensitive citizen, a courageous ethical leader, and a creative entrepreneurial designer. In my view, the attributes encapsulate the skills and dispositions that we need our students to possess as they prepare for college, career, and whatever else awaits them in their post-secondary pursuits. One of the reasons we've been focused on this Bell schedule is that we know, in many respects, our system, very broadly, our system of education is outmoded for future demands. So I just invite you to consider this for a second. We operate in a system that's largely been unchanged for more than a century. It's a system that was designed as a factory model, right? That batch processes students in age-based cohorts through a sequence of segmented learning experience. And in a model like that, time is fixed. We haven't changed the goalposts on the day, but learning is variable. We know we have a range of achievement. Here, we've made incredible headway in modifying the curriculum, in introducing new and innovative learning experiences that enrich the lives of our students. We're focused on the Portrait of a Graduate because we know we need to continue to reshape our approach so that learning is fixed. We can guarantee some educational outcomes for all, but time is variable. So on that note, as you know, we've been thinking about a Bell schedule change at Middlebrook for years. The goals that have been laid out to address the allotments of time for instruction. We were looking to introduce a schedule that addresses time for math. We heard that very loudly through the math curriculum review, that integrates English language arts, that creates an opportunity for intervention in an academic lab that doesn't conflict or minimally conflicts with the STRIDE program, that preserves the team structure, which we prize as much as anything at Middlebrook, that maintains a rich complement of STRIDE offering, and that attempts to slow down the pace of the day in service to students' social and emotional well-being. Add to that list now, as a result of the recent STEM review, the opportunity to provide a new STEM class for our middle school students. So most of those goals we've talked with the board a number of times over the last several years. So I want to just focus in on a couple of those things. With respect to the integration of reading and writing, I believe, and I think we believe, this is a really important step. Besides teachers acknowledging that they'd like to teach reading and writing together, we actually believe it's a better approach. The integration would more cohesively link reading and writing skills, would eliminate duplication in the curriculum, and would eliminate the reality of disjointed sequencing when teachers need to make curriculum adjustments in either reading or writing, which happens all the time. The pacing and sequencing challenges presented by bifurcated courses go away when they're integrated. The integration of these two would reduce total minutes of instruction in English language arts, but we think that this is an area where quality will be better than quantity. In addition to more cohesive alignment, students will have time to participate in the full lesson framework and engage in deeper activities, particularly around read alouds, word study, and then using greater chunks of time for independent reading and writing. As we've considered this, we've also looked at our neighboring districts to compare how we organize ourselves. And this is probably information you're already well aware of, but most middle schools in the area run a typical 7 or 8 period bell schedule. Most have a single English class. Darien in grade 6, I think they continue to split reading and writing. And then I think most importantly, as Jory has repeated a couple of times, just about every middle school principal he talks to is on the hunt for a more effective schedule. I went back and just looked at student achievement over time because I was curious to see with our double period, is there a difference in some of the language arts achievement over time across the district? And so I looked at the DIRT comparisons beginning in 2016 all the way through 22. And I could not find anything in that data that would suggest that there's a relationship to the amount of time we commit to ELA and the way that we commit that time to any kind of improved performance compared to our DIRT counterparts. And I think you've seen that data as we've done the achievement reports to the board every fall. So the other piece related to this is staffing. We currently have a department of 18 English language arts teachers. The integration of ELA would mean that our schedule only requires 9. And I believe that integrating ELA is a sound decision. I also recognize the human impact of the reduction of 9 positions. And so in light of that, if we move in this direction, you need to know that we're going to do our very best to provide every teacher that is displaced through our system with a soft landing. And so what do I mean by that? If we have a position in the district, we're going to move them in a position that makes sense. And if for some reason we don't and they have to move to another district, we're going to do our very best to support them in landing a different position in a different district. From a budgeting perspective, I hope you see that we work diligently to make the ends meet and to maximize the value of our budget expenditures. And so I don't think this is a discussion about cutting people to meet the needs of the budget, but this is a discussion about making an educational decision that results in the reduction of staff. The impact of that decision on the budget is dollar savings in the form of reduced FTE. So I think that's my note on staffing. In terms of slowing down the pace of the day, we just had an hour-long conversation with the Board of Finance that's centered around student social and emotional well-being. And so the only other comment I would add is we know from experience here at our high school in moving to the AB block, we are able to effectively slow down the pace of the day, and kids across our system at this high school talk about the value of that. And so if we can achieve a schedule that provides longer chunks of time and can slow down the pace of the day for our kids, I think that's a good thing. Jory's going to talk to you about some of the models he presented to the staff and some of the feedback from the staff he's received so far. But I do want to just remind the board that when we laid out all of those goals, Jory and his team for the last couple of years have looked at all kinds of models, and it was the AB block that was the only model that he found that achieved all of those goals. So if we're going to look at a different schedule, then we have to revise and reprioritize our goals. And so in the conversation that we had, that he had with his administrative team, one of the pieces, one of the goals that we would have to let go of, at least temporarily, is that goal around reducing the frequency of forced choice for students who are in intervention or with IEPs, and then the creation of the skills and intervention block. So Jory and his admin team kind of took all the feedback. They took the conversation and questions from you, and then they met with the building ILs on Tuesday, and then the rest of the faculty on Wednesday. He'll give you the details. I was present for both. He did kind of restate the goals and explain, just as I have explained to you now, we'd have to shift some of our assumptions if we're going to shift models. But one of the models that he talked about with the ILs and then with the staff was a model that was basically six drop one. Mm-hmm. So core classes in that version would be about 60 minutes, maybe 61, 62 depending, and then the time allotted for stride would be about 40 minutes. By my read on the room, the IL team appeared to be pretty interested in that, and they had some great questions. They talked about how to talk about this with the faculty. So Jory did that yesterday, and I'll stop talking now. But I think the conversation generated some great questions. They had a process for collecting feedback through a form, and you can kind of go through it now if you like.
I take that one. So I think you covered a lot of it, so this may feel a little redundant. I just have a statement I was going to make, and then I figured we could just have a conversation. That was how I thought we would do this. So first of all, thank you for that continued conversation about the Middlebrook schedule, and certainly including all those questions and feedback that we received. We heard the concerns and the continued questions regarding the 80-plus minute block schedule. And as you know, we decided to postpone the parent meeting that was scheduled for Monday night for an opportunity to circle back with our staff about it specifically. So as Kevin mentioned, we met this week with our instructional leadership team and our teaching staff to discuss not only where we are, but where we're headed regarding the Bell schedule. Excuse me, and recognizing that our community has expressed concerns regarding the schedule, I wanted to make sure that I was overt both in my words and in my actions, that we're not deaf to the feedback we received about the 80-minute block schedule. And I also shared that we're reevaluating our proposal and identifying the common ground that's necessary to move forward. So I'm happy to share that the Middlebrook staff expressed overwhelming interest in the conceptuality of a schedule that delivers a 60-minute classes for math, ELA, world language, science, social studies through the team model. And then with this schedule, it will not only allow us to achieve the priorities we laid out, but we feel strongly that it will meet our top priorities and serve our students well. As I wrote to the Middlebrook and Cider Mill parents and guardians on Wednesday evening, we're flexible, but are still maintaining our key priorities that are necessary. And our priorities, as you heard Kevin talk a little bit about a minute ago, are to include at least 60 minutes for math and ELA classes, integrating the reading and writing into one course, keeping the team model, and maintaining a full complement of stride classes that meet at least 40 minutes for each class period, and also providing 5 class sections on team. A group of staff members have already committed to work together to finalize a schedule that includes all those necessary details and is responsive to our stakeholder feedback. And we've already narrowed down that work down to just a few schedules that resonated with staff. And we expect to complete that work in the coming weeks. We'll invite parents to join the conversation and consider the benefits of that revised schedule, and that'll even start as soon as next week. Next Thursday, we have a PTA meeting on the 16th, And Cider Mill and Middlebrook parents are going to be invited and welcome to attend that meeting in our Middlebrook School LLC. I'll just say it out loud for this audience that that's Thursday, February 16th at 9:30 in our LLC. And then as we move further in the process, we'll include the student voice as well. And I would just ask that everyone look for the updates in the Friday letters.
Click for you.
Thank you.
Jordy, thank you so much. That's just so great to hear. I'll just yell. A couple of questions. Do you have I feel like we're starting over again, which I'm so happy about, but I feel like we're now back at square one. And again, I'm thrilled that we're back at square one instead of pushing through our previous opportunity. Would it be possible for you to put together like a timeline of here's our goal, we want to connect with X amount of parents by this date. I think it's great you're having a meeting on February 19th at 9:30, but I do know that 16th.
Yes.
But I know a lot of parents who work. Would it ever be possible to say, by this week we want to engage these people, by this week engage this group, just to make sure it's a collaborative effort that everyone feels like they can be a part of?
Okay, so a couple of things you said there that I'd love to talk a little bit about. First of all, I don't think we're back at square one or ground zero again at all. One of the questions I somewhat anticipated tonight is, hey, if you can find a schedule in 60 minutes, where was that in terms of the original offer? Were you going to ask me that? Hey, you're smiling.
No, but I remember us talking about
we
this.
talked about that, yeah.
Well, the reality is that when we talk about deciding what our priorities and what we want to do, this is where we're going to have to take some
choices.
Make some choices.
Yep.
And as we know, those are very hard choices. I still believe and know that having a skills block would be the best way to go for what we recognize our students are going to need. But the trade-off is going to be that we're not going to be able to do it that way in a schedule that has 60 minutes for each discipline. As far as the parent community is concerned, I respect the fact that folks work during the day and can't make PTA meetings that meet at 9:30 in the morning. So we also need to have meetings in the evening, just to give that opportunity. So the fact that we're bumping up against a vacation here, I wasn't thinking about scheduling anything past the vacation just yet. But certainly my thought is that we're going to have a couple of meetings in the evenings. Is that one? Is that two? I don't know. At some point, I would hope that we're going to get to a point where the overarching feeling is pretty positive. I received an awful lot of feedback from parents through email thanking me for this step and moving in this direction. Walking into the high school tonight, a parent jumped out of her car and yelled to me and was thankful and very appreciative. So if that's any indication, I know that's anecdotal and it's just a couple of people, but it gives an idea of where the flavor of it is.
Definitely.
The staff had a very similar reaction to saying that they were very positive and looking forward to it. And then, we spent a good close to an hour then just looking at models and saying, what do we like, what don't we like? Actually suggested I mentioned that. We did do immediate feedback from them in a Google form of what do you like, what don't you like, what questions do you have, or what else is out there. Not unlike some of the thought exchanges that we've done, but also not unlike you would do any kind of a procedure like this where you want to get positive, negative, and if there are questions.
And I heard about that. When is that due? Are they returning that to you tomorrow?
Yeah.
By end of the day.
We're going to cut it off by the end of tomorrow, yes.
Perfect.
But,
and then could you share that? Will that be shared with the board, or I don't know what the...
Yeah, I think they got to go through. I mean, I have no idea what's in there, but
I mean, eventually.
Yeah, I think my hope is, just again, this is, kind of Kevin's observation of an hour of interaction, but there were, kind of 4 schedules, very similar. Some had features, that where, for example, one or two of the blocks were split either by lunch or a stride. So I don't think anyone was, loved that idea.
Yeah.
But there were a couple of others that were, again, really, really close that I suspect drew a lot of interest. So I'm anticipating what he's going to find is that, there's some, consensus feedback with a bunch of really good questions around those other 2 models. So my hope is, in days they can nail down based on that feedback. Yep, this has got whatever 85-90% of what we're after, and we can, kind of work forward refining, and then they can put something out, both to staff, but also, even before the meeting, put something out to parents and invite some feedback, whether it's through a Google form or something else.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive for these changes. My last question, you said at least 40-minute strides. Will some strides then be less than 40 minutes, or is it just most strides will be 40 minutes?
No, I mean that, at least 40 minutes stride.
Okay.
One of the things that a schedule like this is going to call for is when the students are in their stride classes, when the teachers have their prep period.
Yeah.
And we want to have at least 45 minutes as we want to give them for their prep. So if the stride class is only 40, we're going to have to find creative ways
Extra
to find
5
that
minutes.
additional time. So I would look at that as the minimum, not an about. It's not going to be an average, it's going to be a bare minimum.
Got it.
That was just, anecdotally something else that came up that we talked a little bit about. Came from feedback from the high school that they have their IETs meet after school. We have them meeting during the day, and our staff seem to be looking at that as a possibility. That'd be a way to trade it, so that instead of having IETs during the day, we'd have it after school, and then we'd fill that time with a prep period, and that would get us up to the average we need to. And those are the kind of details, obviously, we haven't gone very far with.
Yeah,
so
no, it's just great that you're looking into those options. Thank you.
To having IET meetings after school.
Thanks. To having
Just yell.
To having IET meetings after school present a contractual issue.
No, not on Wednesdays.
No.
Thanks.
It's going to be a trade-off for meetings that we have already scheduled, so.
All right. Have you guys given any thought to the STEM
Yeah.
class?
In fact,
and who would
I asked Trudy about that, and so she thinks that with 60-minute math classes, we can, teach the curriculum. We don't have to have the data and stats class, and then that would be filled with STEM.
Okay. So are we trading our math teacher for a STEM teacher?
That would be the idea.
Because we're thinking about budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Kevin, you're proposing the 9 ELA and then 1 math, if we go to that.
Thanks, Jose. So right now, in the current budget proposal, I assumed a reduction of 7 FTE.
Right.
And so there are 2 FTE that I'm hanging on to in that budget. And one of the questions that came up, as these guys were looking at these 60 minutes was around world language. And I think the concern specifically is around having enough FTE to cover the French classes the way they're distributed across the schedule. So if that's the case, then we might need it to feed a little of that FTE to cover that.
Because right now the French teachers are teaching 2 colors, right? Or
yeah, I think
yeah,
it's
plus.
depending on where the demand is. But that's just another, this is another just a reality, right, of trying to make it all work. The world language teachers, while they live on team, I don't think we could sit here and say they're fully teamed. They're not, because a number of them teach across teams. And, to me, that's, in a perfect world, would we want them to be fully teamed? We would. That's not a recommendation I can make just looking at enrollment patterns.
Yeah.
And I would just add that the models that we're looking at, they all have some sort of a rotating schedule. And what that does then, to the negative in this regard, is you've got folks that need to be in 2 places at once, and that's where the FT impact for world languages.
Is there anything besides world language that's impacted as far as having to be in 2 places at once?
Special educators.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think my response to that was we have a fair number of FTE that we can reallocate to address that in the building already.
We'll make that work. I'm not worried about that. The world language is the one that I think that we're going to need to get very creative to try to make work.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
So, Joy.
Are you certified in French?
No. It's the only French word I know, besides we. I agree that this is not ground zero, and that this is not starting from scratch. And given all the work that's already been done and is already in place, I think my hope would be to have kind of a robust plan for how and when we're gonna move the process forward and what that completion date would be. I do start thinking about if this is something that everybody is able to settle on, having the time and the ability and the resources allocated sufficiently to implement. And so perhaps, even though we do have the break coming up, getting as much done kind of before the break, as much parent meetings as we can, as much, teacher involvement and staff work as we can, to get us to a point that when we come back from break, we have a pretty good understanding of where we are and where we can go or not go. And just, I think I'm a cider mill parent. I got your email last night. That was fabulous. Just in general, cider mill doesn't get your Friday letters. So I think that we just kind of need to broaden the scope and maybe have some, parent focus groups or figure out some way to invite some technology into the meetings with Zoom or recording, or have some other avenues for parents over the next, 10 days or whatever it is.
So I just want to share that I share your sense of urgency of the timing. I've already scheduled 6 meetings. They're on the calendar for the folks involved. That includes the one for the parents that I mentioned. My goal is to have something very solid within a month, and that's a month with a week off. Okay. So my expectation is that that's what we'll be able to do. And the other thing that I've set up with Dr. Falcone's help is that anything relative to schedule discussions, et cetera, is something I'm going to share with Dr. Falcone, and she's going to make part of her regular communication to parents as well.
Excellent, thank you.
Is there a way you can pilot this?
We want to pilot it. What's going to make that interesting is that we're going from 6 academic teachers to 5, and then the idea that we would have folks. We'd have to get very creative, and short of just
I think it would
rescheduling all the students.
Yeah.
We are going to need to find a way to, how can we do that creatively, and what can we all agree to, I suggested it to the staff on Wednesday, and they understand that, yes, we'd like to pilot it, but that's also going to be a bit of a scheduling mess on a team to then determine where are these kids going and how are we managing that. So it's going to allow us to pilot it to see certain aspects of it, but there's other pieces of it that certain students won't be necessarily involved. They'll be more in a tutorial-like setting, if you will.
Yeah.
So it's some of those details that we have to figure out.
Yeah, so develop a plan.
Yeah, we'll develop a plan and get at it. And if we can, we're going to pilot it.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Good. Any other questions?
So can we put a
Come in,
date?
Tim.
Sure. Can we put a date in the meetings to have the date now for Dory to come back at a Board of Ed meeting? Add it to our agenda. I don't mean now, but I
Yes,
mean,
but we will
right.
look at the calendar and make sure that everybody knows what that date is in advance, well in advance. Yeah.
Thank you.
Chuck, I have a question for you.
Chuck,
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Jen has a question.
AJ and I were talking.
Sorry, I'll even use my mic this time. If we are definitely going to combine reading and writing, who is starting to work on that curriculum?
Karen with the teachers.
Okay.
And she's also been consulting with Teachers College because they have some ideas how we can take the reading and writing units and link them together. I also am very intrigued by this particular schedule because we're also increasing time in social studies and science, which I think gives us an opportunity to do some reading and writing across the content areas. We started that conversation with Trudy today.
Okay.
The social studies department already does really good work around literacy. This is just going to give us more time.
Okay.
And I think we can do that with science. And I think that'll perhaps alleviate some of the concerns that some of the parents expressed at our last meeting about their children getting enough time in literacy instruction.
That would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else around the table? And, always can send questions
through me, and we'll pass them along to Kevin and Jory.
Want to close it out for us?
Oh, well,
Public comment?
we have public comment first. Oh, he's putting the mic back, yes. Again, the board has set time, again, at the end of this meeting for public comments for members to share their views on matters involving the Wilton Public Schools and to help inform the board's decision on such matters. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to any one subject. For the record, please also give your name and address. Are there public comments?
Anybody else speaking? I've already had a chance. I don't want to.
Is there anyone online?
Not yet.
I think.
My name is Steve Hudspeth, 6 Point Hill Road. I spoke in general terms before, and I mentioned that my kids graduated in the 1990s. That does not mean I haven't had a chance to see in a very granular way what happens in our schools. And I've seen it in connection with our faith institution work. Andrea, I love your term, inextricably linked. I've seen that so many times. I've seen it at Miller Driscoll, at Cider Mill, at Middlebrook. I don't have the occasion to interact with the high school as much. I'm sure it's inextricably linked there. But what I see are incredibly able academic people, classroom teachers, support teachers in English, math, all of the fields, and psychological counseling that is so important for these children. These are services our children desperately need. And as was said earlier, there is no finer place for it to be given than in our schools because our kids are there, right? And you have to deal with that every day. And they have to deal with it every day. And you're doing that, and it's an incredible success. When the question was asked, what would you do if the budget were cut to 3.75? I would go back to when the budget was at 4.99 and ask the 8 teachers who were cut in Middlebrook, who did such an outstanding job from all I've heard through all of the COVID times, were really exceptional teachers. That was a really, really hard cut, and I know it was not made easily, and I know it was very, very difficult. But those are the kinds of things when you start taking drastic cuts, and talking 3.75 is a drastic cut. That's the danger. That really undercuts programming. That undercuts support of our kids. That undercuts all the great things that our schools are doing. That would be a true tragedy.
I would like to speak to the topic that you were just discussing. Over the weekend, a group of us that are way beyond all of your students had a discussion about the program you're proposing in terms of the block schedule. And we said, we experienced that. So what is old is new again. And our experience was that our students learned and they enjoyed the process. I would encourage you to go forward with whatever system you feel works for you today. I'm sure what we had back then was a modified one, but where it worked very well. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Nobody online.
So, oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello everyone, my name is Wei Fang. I'm living at 17 Gable Drive North. So I was in a meeting last week and I was actually amazed and shocked to see that the team quickly come up with secondary backup plan after all the people shared their concern about the block schedule. So really appreciate the teamwork and everybody's hard work on that. I know there are 2 different schedules specifically shared with us. One is the bell schedule. Scheduled earlier was the 60 minutes time allocated for core courses and then a 40 minutes time allocated to all the strikes. The other schedule is the one that we saw on the Morning Wilton, which is to keep the current schedule but reduce increase the size of the class from like 15, 16 to 20, 21 students. Although I'm not sure which one looks like the bell schedule is the one that we're heading to, but regardless, I just want to mention that even for the bell schedule, I mean, it's mentioned that the core courses will be rotated. I still want to reiterate the importance of math and English language study. It's currently set to 60 minutes. As you can see, it's happening on a daily basis. It's definitely an increase in math and still a better allocation on ELA compared with the previous block schedule. So yeah, I know all the details are still being hashed out and more information will be shared with the parents. I just want the team to consider that this is really important for the students, and I really appreciate that you take into consideration on that subject. The other thing I want to mention is that after we make a decision of rolling out this new schedule, say bell schedule, do we have a way of evaluating the impact of this new schedule? So can we do some sort of evaluation after 6 months, students allocate the schedule and to see how they perform? Have we thought about it? Have we thought about our success metrics? And if it doesn't work well, have we thought about what we want to do further? And I want that information to be shared with parents and teachers and the broader audience so that we know we're doing either a great job or we need improvement on that. The third thing, a little thing, is that I noticed earlier that the BOF mentioned with regard to the staff allocation compared with our peers. So we have a high allocation on administrative staff member, a medium allocation on general education, and a low allocation on library literacy. Don't know about the accuracy, but that's the word I heard from the earlier discussion. So that concerned me a little bit. I would actually love to see a higher allocation on general education and library literacy rather than like a really high allocation on administrative staffing. So just a side point that I noticed earlier, I want to bring it up as well. So that's all the point I want to mention. Thanks for all the presentations.
My name is Andrew Nixaji. I teach math to 8th graders at Middlebrook School, and I'm president of the Wilton Education Association. Our superintendent stated this evening that the Wilton Public Schools strives to hire the best teachers, knowing that at least 10 teachers are slated to be laid off this spring. Teachers are already considering leaving the Wilton Public Schools. Regrettably, one teacher resigned this week. The WEA implores the board to not cut these teachers who have daily contact with our students. While the middle school principal indicates a positive reaction by teachers to the schedules we viewed yesterday, I would suggest that the positive reaction was largely a sign of relief that the 87-minute block schedule is off the table. None of the 4 iterations teachers viewed yesterday passed muster with WEA leadership. All will require impact bargaining. Much work remains to be done to avoid that and to create a schedule that provides a quality educational experience for our students, your children. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Deanna Paragon. I'm a 7th grader and vice president of Middlebrook. My address is 2 Wilton Hunt Road. First off, I want to thank you very much for deciding to postpone the vote for the new block schedule to devote more time to studying the question how it will affect the student education. As vice president, many students approached me with concerns about the new block schedule and how it will greatly change their school life and may have a negative impact on their academic results. So I've decided to inform you about some of their major points. The first major concern that the students have is that the length of the classes. It's good to know that you think you should reevaluate and reduce the time. There are many children who can barely stay focused on a regular 40-minute class. Imagine how stressful it will be for them if the time is doubled to an 80-minute class period. Of course, extra time allows the teacher to immerse the students more in the learning material. But the question is about this. How long can the teacher actually keep the students learning this material without them getting sidetracked or distracted? The second major concern that the students have is that the absence of common core subjects. We have great teachers across the school that put in a lot of effort day after day to get knowledge into our brains and try to develop our skills that will benefit us greatly in the future. From personal experience, I, like so many other children, truly learn the material if it's a daily occurrence. This system has proven to work because of the fact that Middlebrook has been rated one of the best schools in Connecticut and through our test scores. Finally, another major concern is that the students worry about the feasibility of combining writing and reading into one ELA class because of the time spent on these two subjects we couldn't have. The ability to work with text, having a large vocabulary, and the ability to express one's thoughts grammatically correctly in writing are all important key features and elements for success in the future. With this, many students of Middlebrook are worried if combining these classes will give them an appropriate knowledge and the strong skills in both reading and writing. The students and I think, personally, that we'll be very grateful if you consider their concerns when considering the new schedule planned for the next year, and that it will help you make a decision that will allow Middlebrook to remain a school with great academic opportunities and a comfortable learning environment suited for everybody's needs. Thank you.
My name is English. I live in 181 Boston Road. I want to thank everyone involved for the decision to pause and review the Middlebrook schedule change. Now, given that still lots of work still needs to be done, I hope we are not thinking about it to make this change this fall. If a committee has worked on this for several years, how can we? I hope we don't rush into another plan in just a few days, or 2 weeks, or months. About the combination of reading and writing classes and reducing the instruction time by half, I think that's a big change. It requires more discussion and BOE approval as well. Please do not hide that into a schedule change. Reading and writing are building blocks for our kids' growth and development. I understand when they move up to high school, they have more classes on, let's say, math, science, and they don't have much time to work on English. But right now, at middle school, they still can afford this time. Please let them spend more time on reading and writing. Let them learn this important skill in a solid way. Please do not cut the instruction time. Back to the budget, I understand that Middlebrook have a lot of pressure to reduce some FTE because of the low enrollment number of students. This is unfortunate, and I'm sorry about that. However, please minimize the impact to our students. If you have to start with the FTE, that's not facing students directly. Other than that, I think even if you have to increase the average class time, let's say from 15-16 to 2021, I think that impact to our students is much less than if you have to combine and reduce the ELA class time. Please keep that in your consideration. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience? We have one person on Zoom.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
We sure can. Go ahead and share your comment with us.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Can you hear me? Hi, go ahead and you can share your comment.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, this is Lei Shi. I live at One Holly Place. My daughter is in the 6th grade. In the past 3 years, they have had to deal with online learning, social distancing with others, and COVID. After the students finally adapting and getting used to the new middle school environment, can we give the kids a break from even another bigger change? And secondly, I don't think I agree with the rationale of combining reading and writing. Despite the similarities, reading and writing workshop have many more differences, and the focus isn't the same. By combining these two subjects together, we would lose about 28 minutes of class time, even if we're under the 60 minutes schedule proposal. So over the time span of the 181 days of school students have per year, we would be losing 5,000 minutes of reading and writing class time. Kids at this age, they still need teachers' guidance. Reading independently, kids can do reading independently at home. And this also leads to less time to learn and less time to apply the learning with deep thinking and value. Combined classes could also be more stressful to students due to more work in class compacted into a shorter amount of time. Understood, the enrollment decreases. I'm just throw out an alternative. Can we maintain this school's current curriculum, but increase the class size from current 17 to 18 kids to 21 to 22-ish? So similar to the class size at military school or cider mill. Thank you for listening and your consideration.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Yeah, I just want to bring everybody's attention to information items. Our next meeting will be on February 16th, and then again on March 2nd. Long-range planning will happen on March 8th at 6 p.m., and then there will be another regular meeting on March 16th. And we are adjourned at 9:15. We have something for you. Oh, yes, we do. We have something for Kevin, because tomorrow's a big birthday.